Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the best damn movie-related show on the planet Earth, the John Campea Show, coming to you from right here on my YouTube channel. I'm, of course, your host, John Campea, and it is an awesome honor and privilege, as it is every day, to have you, my international friends, gather around as we talk about our favorite things in the world, movies and movie news and all sorts of good things. And I trust you guys are having a fabulous day already, as I am, as a matter of fact. Listen, we got a bunch of things to talk about here today. We're going to talk about some new concerning HBO numbers have come out. Bill and Ted going straight to VOD, why that might make sense and why it might not. We're going to talk about this, the number one, I didn't realize this till last night, the number one show on Netflix right now, the number one trending show on Netflix, Cursed. I finished watching it. Is it worth you binging on it? We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Couple of little things here to get to, though, first, before we get started, guys. Want to remind you that if you guys want to get in your daily dose of the John Campea Show, however, you can't always be around a computer or YouTube. Maybe you're at work, maybe you're driving. Good news, there is the John Campea Show podcast, the audio-only version of this show. You can get it on Apple. You can see it here on Spotify. You can get it on basically any of your podcasting hosts or apps of choice. Just search for the John Campea Show. You should be able to find that pretty much no problem. But also, I wanted to remind you guys that if you want to get stuff like a John Campea Show mug, makes everything taste even more delicious. You can go to the John Campea Show shop. That's simply at thejohncampeashow.com/shop. And from there, you can find all a bunch of different things we've got here for different various types of John Campea merch. I know a bunch of people always ask me about where you can get stuff like that, and that's where you can get stuff like that. So thank you guys for all of you who have already gotten stuff from there, and thank you for your support. All right, guys. With that down, let's get into something off the top. And the first thing we're going to talk about here off the top is this. You know, Comic-Con is not happening this year. There it is. Comic-Con, the regular Comic-Con, is simply not happening this year. That doesn't mean that there's not some Comic-Con goodness to be had, because there is some Comic-Con goodness to be had. As a matter of fact, Comic-Con at home has already started. It started up yesterday, where they're streaming a bunch of panels and various different things. You can go to the Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con official website and get some more information there. However, I thought it'd be neat for us to talk about some of the main key things that are going to be going on there that are interesting, including today. Let's talk about some of the main big property panels that are happening. There's not a lot of them, but there are a couple that I think are pretty interesting too. So let's talk about the big property, the big shows or the big movies that are actually doing panels at Comic-Con at home. Starting with today at 2 p.m., New Mutants is doing its panel that you can go and watch on the live stream. Now, this is particularly interesting because there are some people who believe that, well, number one, I think for sure we're going to hear a new release date for New Mutants. They're clearly not going to open at the end of August, because I don't think anything's going to open in August. So we're probably going to get a new release date. That's for sure. But there are a bunch of people who still speculate that we may actually get news that New Mutants may be going to streaming, which is possible. We talked the other day why there are a couple of things that work against that. Number one, there is a streaming deal in place with HBO. HBO gets to be the first place that streams New Mutants, not Disney Plus. So there's that hurdle to overcome. There are contracts involved with a certain number of the talent involved in the movie that call for this movie getting a theatrical release. So there are some hurdles to maybe it going to straight to streaming. But as we talked about on the show the other day, there are still some possibilities. The other one that I'm definitely looking forward to is also today, but at 3 p.m., and that's The Boys. The Boys Season 2 is starting up here, I think next month, or in about a month and a half is The Boys Season 2. Ann and I and Corey have been going through The Boys Season 1 again. I love this show. I cannot wait for Season 2. I'm super stoked. Then we've got Walking Dead, the other major property. Walking Dead. That panel is going to be on Friday. I have to admit, I gave up on Walking Dead about a season and a half ago. I think I gave up on it, but there's still a lot of people continue to watch Walking Dead. It's still one of the bigger shows on television. So I know a lot of people are going to be tuning into that. Where was the other one? I think, Bill and Ted Face the Music, which of course we're going to be talking about that a little bit later today. There was some big news about Bill and Ted today, which we'll talk about in just a second. That panel is on... When is it? It is on Saturday. The Bill and Ted panel is going to be on Saturday. So, yeah, it's not Comic-Con. We can't physically be there all that kind of stuff. But there's still some pretty good stuff going on. Obviously, I am most excited about The Boys. That's the one I'm most excited about. But the most curious one is going to be New Mutants. What are they going to announce for New Mutants? A new release date theatrically, which is what I think they will do. There are a number of things preventing it from going straight to Disney Plus with contracts and stuff like that. But it's not impossible, as we talked about the other day, that maybe Disney has bought out certain contracts, whatever. Although, would they want to spend that money just so they can put New Mutants on streaming? I mean, I don't know, but anything's a possibility. That's going to be really curious to see. Because right now, listen, for good or for bad, New Mutants has kind of become a laughingstock for all the wrong reasons. It's become a laughingstock for all, not because the movie's not good. I think the movie looks very good. Personally, I think the trailers have looked great. I'm excited about the concept of it. I can't wait to see it. But it's become a laughingstock because it's been years, man. It has been years. This is like one of the longest running jokes in Hollywood. They just got to get it on screens in front of people. Hopefully it'll be theatrically soon enough. Maybe some kind of streaming thing will be done. We will find that out soon enough. Question here for you guys is this. What do you think about this lineup that they've got right now for San Diego Comic-Con at home? I think they've got a couple of interesting looking things. Are you excited about any of those panels? If not, why not? Jump down into the comments section below and let me know your thoughts. All right, guys. With that down, let's jump into our main topics today. And how do we select our main topics here on the John Campea Show? Well, see, it's really rather simple. You guys come up with them by going anytime 24/7 over to www.thejohncampeashow.com/contact. Once you guys get there, you're going to see a form. Fill it out with your topic or question. It's totally free. Hit submit, and then maybe, just maybe, you might see your submission featured as a main topic here on the John Campea Show. With that down, let's go on to main topic number 1. And our first main topic today gets submitted to us by Dieter Jacobs. And Dieter Jacobs writes, "Hello, John. I got hooked on this new Netflix show called Cursed that sort of surrounds the King Arthur legend, but from a different point of view. I finished the whole season in just a couple of days. Have you had a chance to watch it yet? And if so, what did you think? Thanks." All right, thanks a lot for sending that in, man. And yeah, as a matter of fact, I have been watching Cursed. I've been watching it because, listen, Ann and I are constantly, we go through a lot of stuff. We're constantly looking for something new to watch that might interest us, right? And so I came across, we were going through Netflix the other day, and I came across Cursed, and it said it was trending on Netflix. I thought, okay, I'll check it out. I watched the first episode, and I think I talked about it on the show a couple of days ago when I did watch the first episode, and I mentioned, not great, but me, I'm a sucker for this kind of content. I'm kind of a sucker for this kind of, like, you know, sword and sandal and magic and all that kind of stuff. I'm into it. A different sort of take on the Arthurian kind of legends. Why not? Let's give it a shot. So I give it a shot, and I've gone through it, and I will tell you this. It is right now the #1 trending show on Netflix. It does not deserve to be. But that's not to say it's also an absolute waste of time. I think the show's not bad. I can't say, like, I wish I could sit here and tell you, oh man, you know, sword and sandal show, awesome, it's one of the greatest things out there. I wish I could say that. The reality is I can't. I don't think it's bad. It certainly has its upsides, but it also has a ton of downsides. Now, normally when I'm talking about a movie or show, I like to start by talking about the good stuff, and then I'll talk about the bad stuff. Let me do it a little bit in reverse here. Let me talk about the things I don't like about this show first, okay? The first thing that really stands out to you as you're watching the show is like, instead of a fresh look at the Arthurian kind of legend stuff, this is just a CW look at the King Arthur legend. It's a CW look at it. Now, don't get me wrong. You guys know I like some CW shows, but the spirit of CW, it's all teen angst. It's all these teeny boppers running around. We're changing the world. And it feels like a CW version of the King Arthur take on things. And that doesn't destroy the show. It doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. And it even has some benefits. It really does. But for the most part, that part usually just rubbed me the wrong way as I was watching it. The second thing I didn't like about this show, and maybe this is one of the biggest problems, although it isn't there all along the way, but this is one of the big things to me. It's a blatant Lord of the Rings ripoff in the sense that it turns Excalibur, which they never refer to the sword as Excalibur, by the way. They refer to the sword, they treat the sword like it's the Ring of Sauron, right? You come into possession of it, it gives you great power to rule the world, but it also manipulates you and starts to eat away at your soul and your character, making you do bad things the longer you're in possession of it. I was just sitting there waiting for Samwise Gamgee to jump out and say, "Don't worry, Mimway, I can't carry the sword for you, but I can carry you." Like I was kind of just waiting for that to happen at any moment. And so that kind of bothered me a little bit too. Also, listen, I understand that not every show can have a $10 million per episode budget. I get that. And they don't do a bad job, but you do often feel the low budgetness of the show. If that makes any sense. You do often feel the low budgetness of the show. And every once in a while, that kind of affects it. You know, I just recently watched The Warrior Nun on Netflix, which also wasn't bad. I kind of dug it. There were a number of things I hated how it ended and all that kind of stuff. And I mentioned that you could also feel the low budgetness of that show, but for whatever reason, they kind of stayed within their means. Like they realized they only had so much of a budget, so they didn't try to do too much. There are some times in Cursed that I could kind of feel the low budgetness of it a little bit. The final thing I'll say that I didn't really like about it all that much was the predictability of it. Because at certain parts, you start to realize, oh, now I know what's coming. Oh, now I know who that guy is now. And oh, yeah, so this guy's clearly going to be this. Like, they start to incorporate a little bit too much so that by the time they get to the end of the season, you're like, okay, yeah, none of this surprises me. I won't give away anything for those of you who don't know about it, so we'll just kind of leave it at that. But, oh, let me just say one more thing that really bothered me about season 1 of Cursed. You know how a lot of either movies or TV shows will start with like something horrible happening. Like you'll see the main star of the movie opens with the main star of the movie, and then all of a sudden the main star crashes into a bus. And then you'll hear the voice, "I bet you're wondering how we got to this point." You know, a lot of movies and TV shows do that, right? They start with something very dramatic that happens later in the season or later in the movie. And then you build up to that through the season or the movie. And then you get to that point and see how it resolves. So Cursed starts with the main character, Minway, falling into the water with a ton of arrows into her. And you hear her narration. Where should we start with this story? With water or with fire? You know, they start that. So it's like, okay. And this is a bit of a spoiler. And I'm sorry if this is a little bit of a spoiler. I'm trying not to give away too many of the twists and turns. But this frustrates me to no end. You'd think that by the end of season 1, you get caught up to that first moment that they showed you in the show, right? You figure by the end of the season, you get caught up to that moment, and then you see how that moment resolves. They caught up to that moment, but they didn't show it resolved. It's incredibly frustrating. It's incredibly frustrating. The show opens with this girl, the main character show, getting stuck full of arrows and falling into the water. And you're like, okay, at some point in the season, we'll get caught up to that and see what happens. But they don't. They get caught up to that moment, but that's where the show ends. And it just feels incredibly unsatisfying. It's like, what is my reward for getting through the whole season? Nothing. You left me dangling at the very spot you started the show off with. That doesn't make me excited about coming back for season 2. That makes me want to go, F you, and ditch the show, even if I was loving the show. That you can't reward your audience like that by saying, oh, the little thing we teased you at the beginning, yeah, that's how we're going to tease you at the end. We don't resolve anything. We show you what happens at the beginning, and then we just take you up to that point and don't take you any further beyond that. It's like, what the hell? Like, video games understand you got to give the players little rewards as you progress through the game, right? You got to hit accomplishments. You got to hit goals because those things encourage you to keep going on in the game. Like, I keep bringing it back to Supernatural. Supernatural to me as a television show is a great example that does it right. They have their story for the season, then they get to the end of that season and they wrap up that story. They bring it to conclusion and then use the final few minutes of the final episode to introduce what the next season will be about. That's how you do it. I found that very frustrating about this first season of Cursed. All right. Let me talk for a second about the things I liked about the first season of Cursed. The whole different take on the Arthur legend, I dig it. I dig it. Listen, I'm even somebody who liked in Twilight. Yes, there's something about Twilight that I like. One of the things that I appreciated about Twilight was the fact that they didn't just do the classic vampire stuff. They messed around with the mythology of it, like whether it's sunlight doesn't make them burn, it makes them sparkle so they become visible to human beings, so they got to stay out of the sunlight. I dug that they played around with the mythology. I dug that they kind of treated them like X-Men a little bit, where every vampire has kind of like their own unique power. And so I dug that. And so they do that in Cursed, where they take the classical mythology and they mess around with a little bit just to look at it from a different point of view. Now, it may be good or bad what the results were, but I appreciated that they decided to take that effort. You know, and I kind of appreciate when storytellers want to be a little bit bold like that and try something. So I appreciated that. But I'll tell you the thing that I liked most about, the thing I loved about Cursed, and that is Gustav Skarsgård. Yes, Skarsgård of the classic Skarsgård clan. This is Stellan Skarsgård's son, brother to all the other Skarsgårds. And I love this guy because the only other thing I have seen him in is he played Lofi in the television series Vikings. And I loved him as Lofi in Vikings. And he plays Merlin. Again, it's a different kind of Merlin, but this Merlin, love or hate this show, I think this Merlin worked. And I loved this show every second this dude was on screen. I love the show every second this dude was on screen. And I got to say, for the most part, I liked most of the cast of the show. I did. From the lead characters, the supporting characters. I liked most of the acting, most of the performances. I liked a lot of the characters. Again, it's just all those negatives that I talked about earlier. But man, if you were looking for one thing to hang your hat on to say, hey, John, if you had to point out one thing that makes the show worth watching, I would probably say, watch it for Skarsgård playing Merlin. Because I personally really liked him as Merlin. So overall, Cursed is not something I'm going to tell you need to run out and watch. I just can't do it. But I also don't think it's a complete waste of time if you are interested and you want to check it out. I'd say give it 3 or 4 episodes, see if it's clicking for you. If so, go through to the end. Like I said, in general, I'm glad I watched it. But there's just so many drawbacks to it. I don't know. Have you guys had a chance to watch season 1 of Cursed? If so, jump down into the comment section below and let me know your thoughts. All right, guys. With that down, let's move on to our second main topic today. And our second main topic today gets submitted to us by Gavin Gouge. And Gavin writes, "Hi, John. Bill and Ted Face the Music is apparently now releasing in select theaters and on VOD on September 1st. Could we see more expensive movies adopting this hybrid strategy to release on their original intended dates in a time when movie theaters are open again? Thanks, and bring on the filthy." All right, thanks a lot for sending that in, man. And yes, this just kind of came out this morning. For those of you who may not have caught this news already, Bill and Ted Face the Music, Bill and Ted 3, is going to VOD. It will be released on September 1st. That is the word coming out about it. It's going to be released on September 1st. Now, the official word is it's going to be released on VOD and theaters at the same time. You have to put, as Hollywood Reporter in this article here points out very clearly, you have to put a giant asterisk. Let's just get this out of the way first. You have to put a giant asterisk beside in theaters, because the reality is the vast majority of movie theaters will not allow Bill and Ted Face the Music to play on their screens because it's going to go on to streaming on the same day. The NATO, the North American Theater Owners Association, which is, members AMC, Regal, Cinemark, Landmark, on and on and on and on and on. Most of the movie theaters, not all, certainly not all of them, but a lot of them, the majority of movie theaters in this country, part of NATO. NATO has a rule that says we will not play movies on our screens that you try to release what's called day and date. We will not allow you to release movies into our theaters that you're also putting on streaming on the same day. That's of no benefit to us. We won't allow it. That's why there was a bunch of confusion. Remember when AMC was saying we're not going to play Universal movies anymore? I kept trying to explain to people, AMC never said they weren't going to play Universal movies anymore, period. They said they weren't going to play any Universal movies in their theaters that also tried to release on day and date, that tried to release in that method the way they did with Trolls World Tour. But that's not just AMC. That's all the movie theaters. That's Regal, that's Cinemark, that's all the theaters of NATO. So while they say that they're going to be releasing this on VOD and in theaters at the same time, that's kind of not true. There are going to be some local independently owned theaters here and there that may put it up on the screen. Hell, you may even see it in a couple of drive-in theaters, but don't expect it to get any sort of significant release in whatever theaters are open on September 1st. So let's just be clear about that. One of the things I find really funny about this particular story is the fact, if you guys watch the show regularly, you guys know that it was just, like a week ago, 2 weeks ago, somebody asked the question, hey, John, do you think you could see a Bill and Ted 3 going to VOD and streaming? And I said on the show, for those of you guys who watched and remember, I said, you know what? Bill and Ted is actually one of those movies I think could very well go to streaming, and it could make sense. Because let's look at a couple of facts here. Number one, Bill and Ted's not that expensive, wasn't an expensive movie to make. I can't remember the exact numbers, but I remember we talked about the budget of the film. It's a low budget film by Hollywood standards. It's a low budget film. So it's not all that expensive to make. They don't need to make a ton of money. And let's be honest, Bill and Ted Face the Music was never going to be a box office hit anyway. Like, it wasn't going to be $400 million at the box office anyway. So I remember we talked about, you know what, if any movie makes sense to go to streaming that's kind of on the plate right now, Bill and Ted 3 is actually a good candidate for that. Because it's not going to suffer much from making like a higher budget movie, a movie that does need to make money. It's not going to suffer as much, nearly as much, going to straight to VOD. It actually could benefit from it. And here we are now talking about Bill and Ted, and it's going to be going to streaming. And listen, I still believe what I thought a week or two ago. This actually isn't a bad move. Because I know a lot of you disagreed with me, but I'm telling you, I do not think, and obviously the studio agrees with me, Bill and Ted was not going to make a ton of money at the box office. I think it could have made enough to break even and even make a little bit of money because they kept the budget pretty low. And it definitely has a nostalgia factor. And by the way, that nostalgia factor, I think, is another thing to take into consideration. The nostalgia factor of Bill and Ted, I think, plays well into its move to VOD. A lot of other movies that don't have built-in brand recognizability, don't have built-in brand IP awareness, don't have built-in nostalgia factors built in, they could struggle even more on VOD. But something like Bill and Ted, that's a recognizable IP, has a huge nostalgia factor, that could play, I think, very well into its move over to VOD. So I got to say, I'm not surprised. I mean, I also wouldn't have been surprised if they kept their theatrical date. I wouldn't have been surprised at all if they did, but I'm not surprised, and I don't think it's a bad move for them. And I wanted to know, what did you guys think about this? So I decided to make that the topic of today's question of the day. And I put the questions of the day up on the community tab on our YouTube channel. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the YouTube channel to go and see that stuff as well. And I put this up just before the show started, and I asked you guys this. Considering it wasn't that expensive to make and that it wasn't going to make a ton of money at the box office, was moving Bill and Ted 3 to VOD release a good idea? So far, a little over 2,200 of you guys have responded, and 86% of you are saying, yes, it's a good move. And I agree. I got to say, Gary, still 14% of you are saying, no, it's a bad move, and you might end up being right. You could end up being right about that. But I think this is a prime, if you're going to do it with any movie, this is a prime movie to do it with. Now, getting back to the question that was sent in by Gavin here. Do I think we could see more expensive movies adopting this hybrid strategy of releasing on streaming and in theaters at the same time? The answer to that is not really. There might be one or two isolated examples of it, but I don't think much because, number one, because they're more expensive movies, that means they need to make more money. The more expensive movies need to make more money, and has already been established, you're not going to make a ton on VOD. But of course, the second big problem is, as we talked a little bit earlier, the movie theaters like AMC, Regal, Cinemark, the big players will not allow a bigger movie, let's say like a James Bond, right? Just for argument's sake. If James Bond wanted to release on VOD the same day they put it out in theaters, the theaters are just going to say, we're not going to let your movie play on our screens. And then James Bond will be losing out on $900 million of revenue. And the theaters will be losing out on some revenue too, but they've got to draw a line in the sand. So I don't think we're going to see it. There could be one or two exceptions. There could theoretically be one or two exceptions to that. But I think as on a whole, no, I think Bill and Ted 3 is just a uniquely positioned property. Like we said a couple of weeks ago, I think Bill and Ted 3 is a uniquely positioned property that could benefit from this move. But I don't think a lot of the other movies like this, not a lot of them, especially the bigger ones, find themselves in the same situation. But that's just my take on it. Guys, question is, what do you think about that move? Jump on down to the comments section below and let us know your thoughts. All right. With that down and out of the way, let's now move on to main topic number 3. And our third and final main topic today gets submitted to us by Greg Brunelli. And Greg Brunelli writes in, greetings and salutations. HBO just released their numbers for HBO Max, and they aren't that impressive. Well, that's to say the least, my friend. AT&T is saying they're further along than they thought, but none of the analysts believe that. Apparently, HBO and HBO Max subscriptions are only up 5% from the end of 2019. Considering Disney Plus added 50 million since the end of 2019, isn't that kind of a small number? HBO doesn't have a bad reputation, so why do you think they are so slow out of the gate? Thanks for the daily dose of awesome. All right, thanks a lot for sending that in, man. I appreciate that. And yeah, there's a little bit of a problem going on with HBO right now. Here's the basic gist of it. So this is coming to us from Variety. HBO, since the beginning of the year, when you combine HBO and HBO Max, their subscribers have only gone up 5%. They've gone from 34.6 million at December 31st number of subscribers, only up to 36 million. These are the numbers here. So at the end of December, they were at 34.6 million. Today, after the launch, we're well into the launch now of HBO Max, they're only at 36.3 million. They're only up 5%. Now, this led Variety to then make the following observation. Variety wrote this. The numbers revealed Thursday underscore that building HBO Max into the content hub that AT&T envisions will be a slow process, despite the foundation of HBO subscribers. The uptake for HBO Max pales in comparison to the fast start for the Disney Plus streaming platform that grabbed more than 50 million subscribers from scratch in 5 months following its debut on November 12th, 2019. Disney Plus has a big price advantage, of course, over HBO Max at $7 a month compared to HBO Max's $15 price tag. That comes to us again from Variety. Now, I don't think that shouldn't be a surprise. Look, HBO Max, their main thing that they hang their head on, and what HBO mainly hangs its head on, is not curated content. It's their original content. HBO, HBO Max, HBO Go, HBO Now, whatever you want to call it, is loaded with original, exclusive HBO content. That is their game. Disney Plus, not so much. It's a lot of curated old content. The only really big, high-profile original thing they've come out with since they launched is Mandalorian. They've got other smaller shows in this, but really none of that is the marquee stuff. None of that is the stuff that we've signed up to Disney Plus for. They've got good archives, Marvel, Pixar, Star Wars, all that kind of stuff, and that's all good. That's all great. But that's where we find ourselves at right now. So here we have Disney Plus that's able to come out of the gate, go from 0 to 50 million like that. HBO, with its great reputation, its excellent content. I mean, excellent content. They come out of the gate and they've added 5%, 1 point something million new subscribers to take them up to 36. The question becomes why? Like HBO, it has a wonderful reputation. They put out great content. They've got a huge library. Why would they be struggling right now in gaining new viewers, new subscribers, like a new audience? Why are they subscribing? Or why are they struggling with getting new subscribers? I think the price difference is one factor, but honestly, I don't think it's that big of a factor. I think it is a factor. I don't think it's that big of a factor. Because I'll tell you right now, HBO is far better than Disney Plus right now. Right now, at this moment, HBO is way better than Disney Plus, in my opinion. But I think there are a few other reasons we need to look at about why HBO is struggling. I want to break it down into 3 different reasons. And they're all matters of confusion, all right? Why the slow start for HBO? Well, number one, and we joked about it before, but I think it's a real issue for a number of people. Brand confusion. You've got HBO, you got HBO Go, you got HBO Now, and now we got HBO Max. And we talked about this when it was first announced. It does create a level of brand confusion. I know I myself have spoken to people that said, I don't understand what, wait a minute, so wait, I have HBO on my TV. Is that the same as HBO Max? Do I need to get Go to get Max? Do I need to get Now to get Go and then get Max? Does Max get me Now and Go? Like, it just created brand confusion. They did a terrible job of labeling these different services. Now, I get it. HBO is a recognizable brand, so you want to have that name in there so people know what they're getting, but they needed to come up with a better way of creating brand clarity as opposed to brand confusion, and I do believe that has played into the slow uptick for HBO Max at this point. So that's reason number one for me, is brand confusion. Reason number two, content confusion. We talked about this just shortly, just weeks after HBO Max launched. It was all over the news that a bunch of their high-profile movies left the service. A bunch of these high-profile movies that they used in their marketing, come to HBO Max and get all these great movies, and then a bunch of those movies they advertised, boom, we're gone. And so it created a scenario where a lot of people in the audience were like, well, wait a minute, so time out, wait a minute. So what am I getting? If I get HBO and HBO Max, what exactly am I getting? Because just shortly after their launch, all the stuff about this is leaving HBO Max, this is leaving HBO Max. It's like, wait a minute, didn't HBO Max just launch? And for a number of people, I think it created content confusion. They weren't sure what it is they're getting. And I think that plays a little bit into reason number one, too, with brand confusion. Because going along with brand confusion into content confusion is like, hey, so wait a minute. So if I get HBO Max, what is it I'm getting? Am I getting the stuff that was on HBO? Am I getting the stuff that was on HBO Now? Is it a different thing altogether? Like, it just created confusion. So number one, brand confusion. Number two, content confusion. And number three, which is something I've talked a bit about on this show, which is platform confusion. So they come out and say, hey, everybody, HBO Max is here. You run along now and go pick up your HBO Max. Yay, we all said. Except the 70% of us who get most of our streaming content via either Amazon Fire Stick or Roku then went, okay, great, fire up our Roku, fire up our Amazon Fire Stick, let's install HBO Max. It's got to be here somewhere. The HBO Max, well, let's do a search. HBO Max. Well, there's HBO Now, there's HBO Go. Where's HBO Max? HBO Max launched without being on by far the two biggest streaming platforms in the world, Roku and Amazon Fire Stick. Oh, you can get it on your PlayStation. Yay. I've got a PlayStation, I do, but I don't want to have to switch my inputs on my TV just depending on which streaming service I want to watch. Yes, you can add HBO Max as a third-party add-on to an existing app you may have, like a Hulu or something like that, but I don't want to have to sub-bury in my subscription services. I want my subscription services right there. So they come out of the gate. People don't understand what HBO Max is. They create confusion with their content with everything leading, so people don't know what content am I getting with HBO Max. And then they created a platform confusion where a whole bunch of people went, okay, even though I'm not quite sure what HBO Max is, and I'm not quite sure what content is going to be there, I'll try it. Oh, wait a minute, it's not there. I have a Roku, like most people, or a Fire Stick, like most people do, and it's not there. So personally, I'm not surprised. I mean, I'm not trying to be negative because I think HBO is fantastic. And I think HBO Max will ultimately be very successful. But to be honest with you guys, I'm sitting here and I'm hearing, oh, HBO Max is kind of slow getting out of the gate. They've only added like 1 million subscribers. They've only grown 5%. Isn't that shocking? No, it's not all that shocking. Brand confusion, content confusion, platform confusion. And then you add on top of that the fact that it is at it's at a higher price point. I think it's worth the higher price point because of the content you get, mind you. But I don't know that anybody should be surprised. Now, ultimately, I do think HBO Max will turn this around. They just make their content is just too good. Their content is just too good. I believe they will turn this around. But I also make no apologies for stating the facts. And the fact is, they botched their launch. HBO Max completely botched their launch. Now, it may be unfair to compare them to Disney Plus, but I think it's relevant here. When Disney Plus launched, there was no brand confusion. They made amply clear what you were getting on Disney Plus. They put so much money into marketing and creating brand awareness about what Disney Plus was, so that by the time it came out, everybody understood what they were getting with Disney Plus. So there was no brand confusion. Nobody confused it with the Disney Channel. How's this? Nobody confused it for the Disney Channel. You know what I mean? People were very clear on the content they were getting. They were big on it. Look at these sections we have. Disney, Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars, Nat Geo. Look at this lineup, guys. They were very clear about that. And there was no platform confusion. We're on everything. We may not be available yet in every market around the world because there are licensing things we have to work out. But if you're in a market where this stuff's coming out, you can get it on everything. You got a PlayStation, you can get it on PlayStation. You want to watch it on a web browser, you can get it on a web browser. You got an Amazon Fire Stick, you can watch this on Amazon Fire Stick. Got Chromecast, you can watch this on Chromecast. You got a Roku, you can watch this on Roku. Disney Plus came out of the gate with none of those problems. Again, let me just bring this up one more time. Just again, HBO, brand confusion. Disney Plus had no brand confusion. Content confusion for HBO Max. Absolutely no content confusion for Disney Plus. Platform confusion for HBO. Absolutely no content confusion for that. So again, my ultimate kind of bottom line here is this. I believe HBO Max will be fine. And I look forward to the day, as a Roku user, then I can go onto my Roku and download it and install it on my Roku, and I can watch it. I'm looking forward to that day, and I think it's going to be a great service for years to come. But there is no way around it. They completely botched their launch. They completely botched it. And it's unfortunate. They'll be fine. They'll be totally fine, and I'm still excited about it. But there's no getting around that they completely botched this thing. Anyway, guys, question is, what do you think about the slow start for HBO Max? Maybe you think it's not a big deal. Maybe you think it's a more serious deal than I do. Maybe you think this is going to affect their long-term prospects. I personally don't. What are your thoughts on this? Jump down into the comment section below and let me know your thoughts. All right, guys. With all that down and out of the way, now we're going to move on to take your live questions. And how do you get a live question here on the show? Well, it's really rather simple. You simply go to the tip link that's in the top of the description of this video and click on that. Or if you want to enter it manually, it's streamelements.com/movieblogtv/tip. You'll be getting your comment or question on the show as long as it's reasonable. And you'll be supporting the channel at the same time. And all of us here at the John Campea YouTube channel, thank you guys very, very much for that. All right. That down. Let's get in to your live questions. And we're going to start things off here with, we must have had a bit of a jump here. Hold on a second. Where did it go? It looks like we had a jump. My apologies, guys. I did have this all queued up and ready to go. And now it's moved. I'm sure I'm going to come across it any moment now. hold on a second. Did I go too far? I think I went too far. 1 second. Damn it. Technology. I had this all set up and everything and ready to go. Okay, here we go. We're starting off with Min Tran because the last question yesterday was Steve Rogers is my grandpa. Great. So we're going to start things off here with Min Tran. And Min Tran writes, John, speaking of Swamp Thing, if shows that the CW is broadcasting in the fall, like Swamp Thing or Tell Me a Story, manage to pull Black Lightning or Legacy's ratings, do you think the CW may renew the shows? I don't think so. Now, one of the great things, this was a great move by CW. So, of course, Swamp Thing was a DC Universe original show, and they canceled it after one episode. They let the rest of the series play, but they announced that the show was canceled after one season, after the first episode aired. It's not a bad little show, actually. I was a little bit late to the party on it, but when I did finally get around to watching, I was like, you know what, this is pretty good. I didn't think it was great, but I thought this is not bad. This is pretty good. So CW right now, and a lot of networks are facing a problem. We just had 4 months of no production. Now that's fine for now because, you know, stuff that was finished recording and filming before the lockdown happened, they're able to air, but they're getting to that point now that we're out of content. So CW made a brilliant move where they picked up that one season of Swamp Thing, which most people never watched. And that gives them a new piece of content to put on CW as if it was a new show. Because like I said, most people haven't seen it yet. And because most people don't have DC Universe, so they don't have access to it. It's going to be on CW. Brilliant move. Do I think if the numbers are good, it will revive the show? I don't think so. I believe there was an interview recently where they were basically, the executive producers were basically saying they've moved on from it. So I don't think there's any more interest in the show in doing it. That being said, one never knows, right? I don't foresee Swamp Thing becoming a big, massive smash hit. But if it did, let's say for argument's sake, that Swamp Thing becomes the #1 show on the CW. You know, a rerun of a canceled show becomes the #1 show on CW. It breaks all their records, whatever. Well, guess what? Success tends to motivate action. So if something like that were to happen, maybe you could see that. But I do think it would take something extreme. Like it couldn't just do well. I think it would have to do remarkably well. And I don't think it will. But if it does, you never know. Because like I said, success does breed action. So that's something they probably have to look at moving forward. All right. Thanks a lot for that, Min. Let's move on to the next one here. And the next one here comes to us from an anonymous viewer who writes, I may be wrong, but doesn't Superman kill Zod in Superman 2? I believe he renders him powerless and then throws him down a pit after crushing his hand. Yes, he does. Wouldn't that be more cold-blooded than regretfully killing Zod to protect the planet? Just saying. That's a discussion that's come up a lot. Some people say, well, in a different cut of the movie, they show that he actually survives the okay, whatever. But the theatrical cut is the definitive version of the movie. Superman kills a bunch of powerless people who are no longer any threat. Zod was no longer a threat at all. He was rendered powerless. He was no longer a threat. And he killed him. But you know what, to me, here's the thing to me. The more egregious thing in Superman 2, because it kind of makes Superman a dick. You remember in Superman 2, when he was powerless, Clark Kent, he was powerless. He came across that truck driver in that diner and the truck driver beat him up. Well, at the end of the movie, it was very satisfying for the audience. But at the end of the movie, Superman goes back to that diner and he's now Superman. He's now Superman. And he breaks bones in that truck driver. He went back to simply get revenge as Superman, acting like a massive bully, taking out a guy who posed no threat to him and posed no, like he wanted to get him back. And I get it. From an audience point of view, there was something viscerally satisfying about that. There was something very, as an audience member, it's like, yeah, get that guy. But that's not what Superman would do. Superman as an all-powerful being would not go, hey, little mortal man who can't do anything about, I'm just going to come down there. I'm going to break bones, man. I'm going to break your bones for nothing. Because I want revenge. That to me, like, honestly, you'll lose this argument with me, because that to me was a far greater departure from the nature and character of Superman than what Kal-El had to do at the end of Man of Steel with General Zod. That to me was a far greater departure. So, I mean, I'm not saying I didn't like it. I'm just saying it was a far greater departure, wasn't it? Anyway, that's just my thoughts on that. Thanks for that, Anonymous. Okay, next up, Lucas M. writes, hey, John. As a software engineer, first of all, I respect you already. I have such respect for software engineering because I tried to do a bit of coding. Anyway, tip of the hat to you, sir. Anyway, as a software engineer procrastinating at work, I looked into the Peacock HDMI nonsense. It's actually not just HDMI, but any external display, and it isn't consistent in all browsers. It's very interesting because a website can't access info like your number of displays, certainly not HDMI versus DVI, etc. So I suspect some sinister trickery at play that only a company like Comcast would figure out. I will share if I figure out a workaround. Love your show. Thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts on that, Lucas. So what Lucas is talking about, for those of you who may not remember, and by the way, excuse me for a second, guys, you might hear a little bit of background noise. It's getting a little bit warm in here. I keep the air conditioner off as long as I can, but at some point it starts to get hot and I got to turn it on. So you might hear a little bit of background noise. Anyway, we were talking the other day about how NBC Universal Peacock, their streaming service, besides also not launching on Roku or Amazon Fire Stick or anything like that, they built in an additional restriction where you can't use like HDMI out. And one of the things that I speculated, Luke, not speculate, but one of the things I wondered, Lucas, on that show was I said, but you know, they have to have something built into their software itself that recognizes what people are using, because it can't just be HDMI, because it works on like a Chromecast. Well, how does Chromecast attach to your TV? Via HDMI. It works via Apple TV. Well, how does Apple TV connect to your television? Via HDMI. So it can't just be a cookie cutter, no HDMI signal works. It can't be that. They had to purposefully bake into their software something that recognizes specifically what devices are being used to access this content. And we will block some of them and not block others. And so I agree with you, Lucas, and it's good to hear from a software engineer's perspective. I feel like there is something more sinister. There's something sinister afoot, as Sherlock Holmes would say. You know, the game's afoot. There's something sinister going on. So thank you for sharing that from a software engineer's point of view, Lucas. I really appreciate that, man. Please do let me know what you discover. All right, next up, Mr. Kaplan writes, hey, John. Super excited about the Wonder Woman 84 film. I am too. Patty Jenkins, man. And what DC will bring us in the new year. Lurking when I can. I just want you to know that I'm always supporting in the background. Keep up the great work as always. Much to you and Rob. Oh, thank you so much for that, Mr. Kaplan. I appreciate that. Now, by the way, some of you guys may have noticed Rob hasn't been on many of the shows this week. He was on Monday, and then Tuesday he was supposed to be on the show, but the internet went out in his neighborhood. He couldn't stream in, so we couldn't be on Tuesday. Then yesterday, we only had one topic. There was the DC Universe topic, and that was it. So I told Rob, you don't need to bother coming on the show today. We only got one topic. And then he's normally not on Thursdays. So Thursdays, he has booked out that he's not on the show. So all things going well, you'll see Rob back on the show tomorrow, but that's why you haven't seen him. Anyway, Mr. Kaplan, thank you so much for being here and being a viewer and supporting the show, and I appreciate that, man. And I am also very, very, very excited about Wonder Woman 84. I mean, what Patty Jenkins did with the first movie, I thought was great. I mean, Wonder Woman is not a top 10 favorite comic book movie of mine of all time, but it is high-ranking one. It's a really, really good film. I think what Patty Jenkins did there was great, and I cannot wait to see what she does with the next one. Anyway, let's move on here. Next up, Willow writes, you've said before that if you can be any race in Lord of the Rings, you'd be an elf. Probably, yes. If you had eternal youth, do you think you'd be able to keep on living indefinitely, or would you get bored after a few hundred or thousands of years and want out? You know, it's neat. Anne, my wife Anne, really heavily got into this show with Ted Danson called The Good Place. I'm sure a lot of you guys watched it too. And The Good Place ended on an interesting note. The Good Place ends with the main characters getting into heaven, getting into the good place. It ends with them getting into the good place and getting to live forever. The problem is the show presents it that after a certain amount of time, and they don't really clearly say how much time has passed, but each one of them chooses for oblivion instead because they just get bored. They get bored of everything. And I thought that was an interesting kind of take on the whole thing for them to do. But I don't know. Honestly, life never stops changing. Life never stops changing. You know, to quote again from Castaway with Tom Hanks, you never know what the tide is going to bring in tomorrow, right? You never know. Something different and new. And I don't know that there's any length of time you could be around where life would stop surprising you. So I don't know. I think even with all that, I still go for, we're getting very metaphysical here today. I think even at that, I still go with Elf. I think I still take Elf. Thanks for that, Willow. Let's see. Not to mention elves are hot. So instantly I would be better looking, right? Like the elves are always hot. So if that means I instantly like my good looks, and look, I'm clearly a superior physical human being, obviously. But I could instantly be like 5 times better looking. Yeah, I'll take that any day. All right, Ryan Lohner writes, 1 of 2. I just watched Dealt, a documentary about Richard Turner, perhaps the greatest card mechanic who's ever lived, and also a black belt, mountain climber, knife thrower, and fisherman, all after losing his sight at age 9. A great film about a fascinating guy, and it actually inspired me to get into card mechanics myself. Today, I did my first successful one-handed shuffle. Okay, I'm going to tell you right now, I've never heard of this. And according to IMDb, it is a 2017 documentary. 62-year-old Richard Turner is renowned as one of the world's greatest card magicians, not mechanics. He's one of the world's greatest card magicians, yet he is completely blind. This is an in-depth look at a complex character who's one of Magic's greatest hidden treasures. I'll bring it up here on the screen so you guys can see what it is we're talking about here. Dealt. I have never heard of this before. But I got to tell you, Ryan, that sounds awesome. That, first of all, this dude sounds awesome. This dude's a badass. Okay, I want to watch this now. You've just put it on my radar. Thanks for sharing that, Ryan. I really appreciate that, man. All right, let's go. Next up here comes to us from Where Goddamn Mask, who writes, I'm cool with the Donald Glover Lando series if he's involved creatively. But what I want to know is where the F is Atlanta season 3. If Lando happens, I hope he doesn't get delayed much more. Yeah, so for those of you may have heard or may have not heard, there've been rumors going around that Donald Glover is going to do a Lando series, right? That Donald Glover is going to do a Lando series for Disney Plus. It should be pointed out, this has not been confirmed by Disney, and none of the major trades have given any collaboration to this. It's been reported on a small YouTube channel. That doesn't mean it's not true. Being reported on some small YouTube channel doesn't automatically mean it's not true. Keep that in mind. So it very well could. It could. I'm going to admit, though, that if such a rumor was true, it would surprise me. It would surprise me because from everything I understand, Donald Glover didn't love Solo. I really like Solo. And I don't think he disliked Solo. I never heard he disliked Solo, but I heard the things I've read and heard was that it's not like it was his favorite filming and shooting experience of all time. Not to mention, Donald Glover right now is one of the hottest guys in all of entertainment. He's simply one of the hottest stars in all of entertainment. He can do whatever he wants to do right now. Not to mention he's got this massive award-winning series with Atlanta, and you're right, where is Atlanta the next season? He can do whatever he wants in movies, television, music, whatever he wants to do, he can do. Would he want to go and do a Disney Plus Lando series? I don't know. I can't think of any super compelling reason why it would absolutely not be true. Again, that stuff about he seems really busy, he can do anything he wants. Would he really want to do a Lando series? Yeah, there's that, but I don't consider that a major end of story, compelling argument that it would never be true. I don't think there's any real compelling reason why it can't be true. Again, I'll be a little surprised if it ends up being true, but who knows, right? Disney's got a lot of money. Disney's got a lot of money, and listen, it's also not just about money, right? There also could be other ways to make deals. You have other assets that you can deal with besides money. Could be, hey, Donald, we really want to do this Lando series, and tell you what, we'll give you a 3-picture deal that you can write and direct. We'll give you a 3-picture deal for Disney that you get to write and direct. Hell, maybe even we'll set up a lunch with you and Kevin Feige. Maybe you can even write and direct a Marvel film. And you guys know how much of a geek Donald Glover is. So who knows? Again, I mean, I haven't made it a topic of my show because until it just seems a little bit of an out there rumor until I see it. And if we do see it pop up on Variety, Hollywood Reporter, Entertainment Weekly, whatever, then we'll talk about it a little bit more in depth. Right now, again, like I said, I don't think it's impossible. I'm just saying I would be surprised. So let's see. Let's see how that all turns out. All right, let's move on here. Next up, Man of Steel rules rights. In December of 1993, Tombstone debuted and earned a total of $56 million on a $25 million budget. 6 months later, Wyatt Earp debuted and grossed $25 million on a $56 million budget. Both had great casts. Why would a studio release a similar movie that close together? It seems incompetent. Well, except there has been other examples of stuff like that where it hasn't worked out all that badly, right? Whether you're talking about Olympus Has Fallen and White House Down, or whether you're talking about Dante's Peak and Inferno, or whether you're talking about, or whether you're talking about Armageddon and what's the one with Morgan Freeman where the asteroid's coming to hit the Earth? I can't remember. There's Armageddon and there's the other one. Hey guys in the live chat, what is the name of that movie with Morgan Freeman where the asteroid's coming to hit the Earth? But anyway, it's not like it's Deep Impact. Thank you, Black Elder and Omar 94 and Dave. A bunch of you guys find that Deep Impact. It happens a lot, and sometimes it works out. Sometimes they can piggyback on that. Hell, Jungle Book and Mowgli, right? Andy Serkis directed, like you had your Jon Favreau do Jungle Book, and then Warner Brothers tried to put out Mowgli. So it has happened before, and if you can do it better, great. I'm not a fan of the practice myself. I'm not a fan of the practice. But sometimes multiple studios may think, hey, this topic would be hot right now. We think a movie about this is a good time for it. And then you get studios racing to make their version of that movie, right? And it continues on to this day. We still see that happening today sometimes. We talk about different studios producing different versions of a movie or of a story, and there's kind of a race to see who can get to it first. So it's not the first time, Man of Steel. It's not the first time, and it won't be the last. All right, Henri Martens writes, have you seen Cart Narcs? It's a show on YouTube that shames people, sometimes unfairly, who don't put their grocery carts back into the cart return. In one video titled, Texas is Messy, a guy threatened to kill him. His job is completely dangerous. First of all, no, I've never heard of this. I've never heard of it. But let me say, I am almost, is OCD the right acronym? I'm almost OCD when it comes to putting a shopping cart into the shopping cart holding spot in a grocery store parking lot. I'm almost anal about it. I absolutely 100%. I will never not put my cart back. Never. Ever. To me, it's just, you can tell about somebody's basic decency about that, right? It's the simplest thing in the world that's a courtesy to everybody else. Put your damn cart back. So I always do it. That said, while I believe it is inconsiderate to not do that, and while I believe it is the right thing to always do to take your cart, it's just a simple courtesy. It is a simple courtesy for everybody else. Put it back. While I believe that, I am not a fan of shaming people for minute things. I'm not a fan of that. So I've never heard of this show, but I'll tell you right now, my first reaction is, no, I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of publicly humiliating somebody because of something relatively small. Relatively small. If it's major stuff like To Catch a Predator or something, yeah, go nuts, like shame those people. But for something relatively small, like what's next? We're gonna put hidden cameras in every restaurant, and if you don't tip enough, we're gonna publicly humiliate you to millions of people. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it sounds kind of funny, but I'm not comfortable with that sort of thing. I got to admit myself, I'm not really comfortable. Even though if I saw somebody leaving their cart in the parking lot without putting it away properly, I'd probably give them a dirty look. But I'm not going to take out my video camera and then share it to my thousands of followers or anything. You know, I don't know. Feels kind of weird. Anyway, thanks for that, Henri. All right, next up, Zach Yeoman writes, "Hey, John, I actually started watching your channel near the start of COVID." Oh, wow. Well, it's good to have you around, man. Around the start of COVID, so a relatively new fan, but really enjoy this community. Oh, that's good, man. Thanks. We're really glad you're here. I must say I get a lot of entertainment out of your disdain for the name Peacock, and it's not that bad. I don't know. I hate that name. I hate that name. Granted, do I overexpress my disdain for the name of the network? Yes. Listen, I still think the network's a great idea. And what I do respect about Peacock, what I do respect about it is that they're trying something different, right? They're not just going with a flat, oh, here's our subscription service. There's a free version that's ad supported. There's a $5 ad supported one that gives you even more bonus content. And then there's a more expensive tier with no ads. I mean, they're trying something different to stand out and offer a selection, offer options to their audience. And I respect that. And they've got some good content. And I'll be really curious to see how they evolve. Again, I think they also botched their launch like HBO Max, but I am I remain to this day very curious to see how they evolve, because I think they've got a lot of potential. So let's see how that goes. Anyway, Zach, good to have you here, man. All right, next up, Man of Steel Rules writes, "Hey, John, Airwolf has been mentioned a lot lately, but did you ever see the 1983 Blue Thunder with Roy Schneider? I talk about Blue Thunder all the time. The 1983 Blue Thunder with Roy Schneider, it led to Airwolf getting created in 1984. I first saw it on Cinemax in the mid-'80s, and huge yard sale my dad had installed. Yes, now I saw it obviously when I was super young, but I love Blue Thunder. What was really cool about Blue Thunder at the time was that it was marketed kind of sci-fi, but I remember reading articles about it that everything in Blue Thunder, which is like this ultimate helicopter, this ultimate like weapon helicopter, was that all the technology in it existed. At the very minimum in theoretical form, like at least in, what's the preliminary stages of something, at least in the initial concept stages, but all the technology was at least theoretical or actually applicable at the time, which is really neat. And then you're right, Blue Thunder clearly had an impact on Airwolf then getting made. And Airwolf came a little bit later. But you know, I was a big fan of, actually I watched Blue Thunder again, maybe about 10 years ago. I watched it again. And it's still to this day, I still do this thing because Roy Schneider's character in that movie does this little test to tell if he's losing his mind. Because they say if you're going crazy, in the movie they say if you're going crazy, one of the first things you lose is your internal clock, your sense of time. And so he puts himself through this driving test to test the sense. I always remember that. Anyway, yeah, I really love Blue Thunder, man. I did. Thanks for bringing that up. All right. Tiberius writes, "Hey, John and gang. Have always been amazed at how real world experiences can influence how I judge or feel about a movie." I mean, it's absolutely. How art impacts us is directly impacted and directly affected by our backgrounds, our experiences, and where we happen to be at that particular moment when the art hits us. It absolutely is. You're 100% right. How I judge or feel about a movie. Case in point, on February 11th, 2010, my wife and I get into our car after seeing Avatar and get a call on my cell with a notification from our airline that our connecting flight the next day had been canceled due to weather, preventing our arrival and attendance at the opening ceremonies of the 2010 Olympic Winter Games. I know it's not fair, but I can now not see that film without feeling the pain and anguish both my wife and I felt that night, plus the substantial monetary loss for which I was not able to get refunded. Any similar experiences amongst the John Campea Show community? That's a good one because, yes, like we often talk about association with movies, right? We talk about association with movies, and we normally talk about them in the positive sense. Like, a lot of people have written in over this past year or whatever, talking about how this particular movie is really special to me because it was the last movie I watched with my uncle before my uncle passed away. I often talk about the movie, the 1989 version of Batman by Tim Burton, because it was one of my strongest memories of my best friend growing up, who of course died a couple of years ago. My best friend growing up and I, as kids, going down to Jackson Square Cinema and going to watch a Batman movie. You know, so I have that association with it. And a lot of the big movies, the first time I saw The Phantom Menace, I know exactly who I was with. I know exactly where I was with, where I was. And it creates these associations, right? And yeah, man, I could totally see how that then connected with an event like what you had would create a painful association. I absolutely get it. I absolutely get it. Now, I can't associate a movie watching experience myself with a painful event that then followed. But I had a slightly similar situation to yours recently. My wife and I, around Christmas time, we were supposed to fly back to fly up to Canada to see my family. I generally only get to see my family once a year, which sucks. And I only get to go home, my hometown, Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, which to me is the greatest city in the world. I honestly, I have a hard time thinking about Hamilton without getting kind of emotional. Actually, you know that song Husavik from Eurovision? The song they sing at the end, My Hometown? I listen to that song, I get tears that well up in my eyes because it makes me think of home. Anyway, side story. But I remember we were supposed to go back and we went out to dinner quick before we were going to go to the airport. Now, we had connecting flights. We were supposed to fly from Burbank to Las Vegas, from Las Vegas to Toronto. And we had like a 3-hour buffer between when our flight was supposed to arrive in Vegas and when our flight was going to fly out of Vegas to go to Toronto. We had a 3-hour buffer. Plenty of time, right? So we're sitting down having dinner, getting ready to leave for the airport at this restaurant. We get notifications on our phone that your flight's been delayed by an hour. Oh, okay. Flight's been delayed by an hour. Guess we got time to get dessert. And we were with our buddy at the time too, who was going to drive us to the airport. And then we get another notification that it's been delayed another hour. We're still in the restaurant. I'm like, okay. Well, that's fine. It still gives us an hour of buffer when we get to Vegas to fly to Toronto. Then like 20 minutes later, get another notification. It's been delayed another 3 hours. That meant we were not going to get to Las Vegas in time to get our flight to Toronto. And we had already booked a whole bunch of stuff and we just lost out on it. Just the money we had spent on the stuff we had arranged. We just lost our money on it. We couldn't go. My time was very, very tight. So it's not like we could just leave 2 days later because then I would have only had 1 day, 1 day in Canada with my family. And it wasn't going to be worth all that travel just to have 1 day with my family. So yeah, I kind of had a similar experience, but obviously yours is more dramatic. All the money expense about going to the Olympics. God, and I can totally see, Tiberius, I can totally see how that would create a little bit of a sore spot in your jaw whenever the movie Avatar comes on. It's a negative association. It's not the movie's fault, but I can totally get where you're coming from, man. All right, next up, Eternity writes, had you found yourself in a continuity where you were confronted with Soviet John Campea introducing cigarettes to young impressionable Canadians, Ryan Reynolds in the backstage area of Comic-Con, would you interfere and face the Red Menace or look away? Okay, let me try this again. If you're in a continuity where you're confronted by Soviet John Campea introducing cigarettes to young impressionable Canadians, Ryan Reynolds in the backstage of Comic. So, but I was personally with Ryan Reynolds in the backstage area of Comic-Con. Would you interfere and face the Red Menace or look away? Oh, I totally look away. Normally, I would go and stop evil John Campea, but no. If I was with Ryan Reynolds, I'd like the kids like, hey, if their parents aren't doing a good enough job with those kids to make sure they don't take up smoking, that's the parents' fault. I'm not proud of that answer. I'm just being honest. If I got to hang out with Ryan Reynolds backstage at Comic-Con, I'd probably take that one up. I can always do anti-smoking ads later in my life if I want to. Wouldn't have a lot of chances to hang out with Ryan Reynolds backstage at Comic-Con, so I'd probably do that. Anyway, all right, next up, Topher Rocks writes, are you excited to see a new version and actress take on the X-Men's Rogue? She is such a powerful badass and a great character. I'd love to see her better utilized on the big screen and less sidelined. She has yet to be given her due, in my opinion. Well, I mean, here's the problem with Topher Rocks. So many X-Men universe characters are really, really good. When you really get into a lot of their backstories, there's a lot of X-Men characters that you could do more stuff with. And that maybe you should do more stuff with. Rogue is definitely a fascinating character. The funny thing is, Rogue is really not more known for her real own powers. Rogue's native power is the absorption, right? She's really more known for the powers she's already absorbed, like the Ms. Marvel stuff, the Captain Marvel situation. Most of you guys who know your comic books know what that situation is like. Her flight, strength, and vulnerability, all that kind of stuff. But those aren't really her powers. When you look at her power set, I thought the first X-Men movie did a really good job going into how that would be a curse for a young girl. Her power set destroys her life. Right? And I love the fact that that first movie really delves into that part of her. And I love that they never made her into the Marvel version of Rogue, you know, post getting those powers. I like the fact that they never went there because those aren't her natural powers. Those aren't her actual mutant abilities, which is interesting. So would I be interested in more Rogue? Sure, I would. Do I necessarily personally feel Rogue needs to be pushed to the front of the line ahead of a lot of other potentially great X-Men characters? I don't know. Listen, I've said this for a long time. One of the characters I'm super stoked about, I remember at the AMC 100 million view party, this is going back a few years, but at the AMC 100 million view party, I remember being asked by one of the audience members, what character would I really love to see? And I said, look, I know we've seen a glimpse of him in the movies before, but I want Bishop. Bishop, to me, narratively speaking, is one of the most fascinating characters you could do. So I would really be more interested in this. So yeah, if they announced tomorrow that they were going to do more stuff with Rogue, absolutely you'd have my interest. Absolutely. If it was clearly up to me and I had to list 5 or 6 X-Men universe characters that should be top of the rung, that they should really get into more to start with, I don't know if I'd have Rogue in that top 5. Personally. I think a lot of people would. I don't know that I personally would. But anyway, it's a great question, Topher, and let's see what they do moving forward. All right. Jared's Reviews writes, another month since theaters closed and knocked another 18. That's right, Jared, you've been going through a ton of movies during the lockdown. Another month since theaters closed and knocked another 18 movies to bring my total to 158 movies you've watched since the lockdown started. Slowed down since things have started to slowly open back up. New movies I watched were Zodiac. I'm not huge on Zodiac. I know a lot of people love Zodiac. Honestly, not one of my favorites. Anyway, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which I love. Steve Jobs, Dead Poet Society. Good Time with Robert Pattinson. Enemy of the State. Green Room. That was kind of nice too with Sir Patrick Stewart's in that. Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, Under the Skin, About Time, Scoob, Blind Spotting, Late Night. I liked Late Night, I gotta say. Stardust. I think that's the world's new Princess Bride. I love Stardust. Anyway, Hamilton, Bad Times at the El Royale, Palm Springs, Princess Bride, The Kids Are All Right. My least, I like it. That's Mark Ruffalo. That's a great, I really do like The Kids Are All Right. That's a great movie. Let's see. My least favorite was Good Times. Just not a fan of the Safdie brothers directing style. I really liked Good Time, I gotta say. But Pattinson was stellar. Favorite was About Time. Not the best movie I saw, but a movie that had themes I connected with personally, and I'm experienced now. The last 30 minutes had me tearing up. Now, for those of you guys who don't know what About Time is, it's still funny. A lot of people have never gotten around to watching About Time. About Time stars Donald Gleason, and who is Brendan Gleason's son, actually. It stars Donald Gleason and Rachel McAdams, and Bill Nighy plays Donald Gleason's father. My son, my dad. Anyway, it's really good. And it is a time travel movie. which I normally do not like. I've always said I don't like time travel used in a lot of movies, but there are a few exceptions. And I always mention, obviously, Back to the Future, Star Trek: The Voyage Home. One of the ones I should also include in that is About Time. It's a really good little movie, and I'm always surprised how many people have never gotten around to watching it. So if you guys are so inclined and you're looking for something to watch that's kind of funny, heartfelt, just overall good, solid movie, and you want to see more Rachel McAdams, and who doesn't want to see more Rachel McAdams, speaking of Eurovision, you can't go far wrong checking out About Time. All right, man, thanks for sharing your thoughts. Man, you have been catching up on a lot of films, dude. All right, next up, another Skywalker tips $250. Dude, I don't know what to say. Thank you so much, man, for supporting the channel on that level. I'm floored. I'm seriously floored. Thank you so much, man. And another Skywalker has been a supporter of this channel, one of the great supporters of this channel for a long time. Thank you so much for that, another Skywalker. Anyway, let's see what you're writing in here. Hi, John. I don't have a question. I've been busy with work and haven't been able to watch live, so I just wanted to send this in to support my favorite YouTube channel. Keep up the great work. Dude, I don't know what to say. Thank you so much for that. It amazes me. You know what? There is a certain understanding around YouTube that everybody wants everything for free. And that's kind of true. We do. And that people won't pay money. You know what? I think people do want to support content they enjoy. I think people want to support content that they enjoy. And, you know, I do put in a lot of work to try to make this show as much of a value to our viewers as I can. I mean, that's why I invest in cameras and why I invest in gears. Because, I mean, listen, I could do this show. I could do this show. Let me see if I can bring this up here. I could totally do this show simply with this webcam. I could do this show with this webcam, and it would be pretty much the same show for the most part, right? But the reason I try to invest in the better cameras and all that kind of stuff is because I want, you know, if the audience is going to watch my show, I want to give them as good of a viewing experience as possible. I want them to enjoy their stay. See, there it is. Bye. Okay, I want to give them as good of a viewing experience as possible. And, you know, I do that. And, you know what I have found? If your audience can tell that you put in a lot of effort to try to give them something of value, whether it's entertaining, whether it's information, whether it's context, whatever, I have found that when you do that, your audience wants to support that. You know, we don't charge, you know, for the John Campea YouTube show. It's on YouTube. It's free. But you know, I've always found, like, all of you guys who've sent in questions and tips today and stuff like that, you prove that people want to support the content they enjoy. And no, I'm the same way. I do a lot of tipping on a lot of different channels as well. And you guys here do this. So anyway, thank you so much for that, another Skywalker. Seriously, I appreciate that. Everybody here at the John Campea YouTube channel, thanks you for your support, and everybody who does that. So thanks for that, man. And you didn't even have questions. You just want to stick in and send in some support. I appreciate that very much, man. Thank you for that, dude. All right. Alan D writes, I'm still kind of floored by that. Alan D writes, considering how cursed the New Mutants is, do you think releasing it online will cause a complete internet blackout and erase all things? Yeah. I mean, so everybody's speculating now. What are they going to announce at that New Mutants panel today at Comic-Con? Are they going to go straight to streaming? But it's so cursed. If they do go to streaming, will the internet get wiped out? Will the day before it starts streaming, the complete internet go down? I think you're onto something, Alan. I don't believe in conspiracy theories, but you might be onto something here. I think the very internet itself might be in danger if they try to put New Mutants on streaming at this point. All right, Taki75 writes, speaking about character actors, some of my favorites: Jack Elam, Ward Bond, Joe Magenta, David Morris, who I talk about David Morris all the time, Claude Rains, Sidney Greenstreet, Harry Morgan, David Strathairn. He should be A-list. He should be A-list. But he's kind of one of those guys who's at the precipice of being he's very recognizable as an actor. I don't know, but should he be called a maybe it is fair to call him a character. I don't know. William H. Macy, Will Patton, J.T. Welsh, Dennis Farina, Arlie Emery, Martin Landau. Yeah, there's a lot of great ones. A lot of great. Some of the best actors in the world, actually, are what we would probably consider character actors, and some of them are the best in the world. It is kind of crazy. I like your list because we were talking about character actors the other day. Thanks for following up on that, Techie75. That is a great list, man. All right, Russell Amador writes, "Hey, John, before we put a nice bow to end Fight Island for the month," that's right, we got Whitaker versus Till coming up here, which I'm very excited about, of July, we have one more stellar matchup. Who do you got this weekend between Whitaker and Till? It should be a good one. Could spark way more fireworks than the snooze fest Usman had. Hey, listen, I actually thought the Usman fight was a work of art. I thought the Usman fight was a work of art. It takes a special level of skill and talent to completely impose your will on another man and leave that other man helpless. And that's what Usman did to Jorge Masvidal. That's what I told everybody he was going to do. Now, he didn't knock him out like I thought he would. I thought he'd be able to finish him. He didn't finish him. But that entire fight, almost that entire fight, was Kamaru Usman completely imposing his will on Jorge Masvidal. And Jorge Masvidal, most of that fight was a flailing baby, not being able to do anything he wanted to do. I want to do this. Nope, Usman's not letting me. I want to go here. Nope, Usman's not letting me. Usman either had his back on the mat or his back against the cage and completely imposed his will on him. I told everybody Jorge Masvidal's a little overrated. As soon as he comes in against a guy who can pick him apart like that and just render him helpless, I'm told you, Jorge Masvidal's entertaining. I like Jorge Masvidal. But I told you, he's not a number 3 guy in the world. He is not a number 3 guy in the world. Anyway, I like Darren Till. I think Whitaker is probably going to destroy him. However, here's the thing. We have seen incredibly good fighters become shells of their former selves after a really big loss, right? And Whitaker losing his title, I'm going to be very curious to see what Robert Whitaker shows up in that octagon. I'm going to be very, very curious to see which guy shows up. If the normal Whitaker we all know shows up, I don't think he's going to have a lot of problem with Till. Like, Till hits like a sledgehammer, man. So anything can happen when Darren Till is fighting. But I think if the Whitaker we know shows up, I don't think he's going to have a terribly hard time getting the win. Not like a knockout in the first 30 seconds or anything like that. I don't think there's going to have too much difficulty getting the win. But if what we've seen happen to other big, major, elite level alpha fighters after a big loss that kind of become shells of their former selves, if that happens, who knows? Till hits like a gorilla, man. He's got stupid power. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see, but I am looking forward to that fight, dude. All right, next up. Joe Stuff, I like the name. Joe Stuff writes, "Hey, John, on the amount of streaming services is getting more and more crowded, and trying to pick just one can be overwhelming. True. Each service has its own pros and cons, of course. But in your opinion, if you had to pick just one, which is the best and why?" Whew. If I had to pick just one streaming service right now, because right now I have just about all of them, I'm not going to have all of them forever. Like, I'm going to cancel a few of them, but right now I have all of them right now. If I right now could only pick one, which would it be? It might actually be Hulu. I have been a big fan of Hulu for a long, long time. I love how the fact that, number one, they just put out all the TV they put up there. They also have some really good original stuff. I don't know. I'm just a fan of Hulu. The simplicity of Hulu, the way they curate the content on Hulu. I've always been a fan of Hulu. Also in the running would have to be Amazon Prime. I almost said AMC Prime. Amazon Prime would have to be in the running. That got some great original stuff. But it might have to be the go-to right now is probably Netflix. Now, 2 years from now, once Disney Plus gets around to putting out actual big original content again, because so far they've only put out Mandalorian, maybe that answer will be different in a while. But yeah, right now it would either be Hulu or Netflix. Netflix has just got so much content, both curated and original. They crank out original content like gangbusters, and they got so much original content. Some of it really bad, some of it really good. But yeah, man, it would either be Hulu or Netflix right now. If I had to choose today, it would be one of those two. But I am very interested to see how HBO Max evolves. I'm very interested to see how Disney Plus evolves. But yeah, I think right now it'd have to be one of those two. Anyway, thanks for that. Oh, and Joe, you tipped $20. So at some point in the next couple of weeks, this question is going to be segmented out and put up as its own video. So thank you for writing that in, Joe. And thank you so much for supporting the channel, man. We appreciate that. All right, next up, Jesse writes, you talk about this a lot, but no spoilers. The Last of Us Part 2 to me is a great example of characters being there to serve the story. And yes, and not the story being there to serve the characters. 100,000%. 100,000%. I had an argument actually with a buddy of mine about Last of Us 2. Most people I know actually love Last of Us 2, but I personally know a few people, friends of mine, who didn't. And there are a bunch of people out there who don't. And if you didn't like Last of Us 2, all due respect. If you like it, that's great. Or if you didn't like it, that's great. You know, we like or dislike whatever we do. All art is subjective. Last of Us 2 is a bloody masterpiece of narrative storytelling. It is a bloody masterpiece of narrative storytelling. And I have found in my argument with a buddy of mine about this was that they shouldn't have done this to such and such a character. I'm not going to say who the character was. And they shouldn't have done this to this character. It's like, okay, but, and this came up specifically. I said, the characters are there to serve the story. The story isn't there to serve the characters. The characters are at the heart of your story. Yes, absolutely. But they must ultimately play their part in the story that must come first. And the story and the underlying meaning of what the story of Last of Us 2 is was effing brilliant. And in order for it to be that brilliant, it required the characters to play certain parts. And I agree with you, Justin. Again, not everybody agrees with us, and that's perfectly cool. It's all good. But I completely agree, man. Last of Us 2 is a great example of how the characters must be there to serve the story. The story is not there to serve the characters. I completely agree. Anyway, good observation, man. J Meister 25 writes, Boromir, greatest on-screen death? I tend to think so. What do you think? I don't know. Like, the Boromir is my favorite all-time literary character. Even though he was just in the one book. Boromir is my all-time favorite literary character because my favorite theme in storytelling is the theme of redemption. And the redemption of that character, both in the book and the way it played on the movies, is one of my favorite things ever. But is it purely one of the greatest on-screen death scenes? I don't know. There are some great ones. Hans Gruber in Die Hard is a great death scene. That is a great death scene. So I don't know. It might be. It would be up there and it'd be in the discussion. But it is certainly one of my favorite moments in all of storytelling. Not necessarily one of my favorite moments in movies, but like one of my favorite moments in storytelling because, again, that redemption story of him is, it touches me in a way that few other things do in storytelling. And I love that character, and I love the way the character dies and the character ends. And it's brilliant, and I love it. All right, next up, Derek O, 1970 writes, Hey, John. From one Man of Steel fan to another, I was at the first Smallville site a week before the action scene. It was amazing to see, including the giant gas tank inside the fake 7-Eleven. The next month, I was at the old Union Station in Chicago, Metropolis cabs, and I got to sneak in. I heard action, a scream. I heard action, a scream, then cut. I had to wait 2 years to know what that was. Turns out it was the Death of Zod scene that you talked about. After that, I got a chance to meet and get a pic with Zack Snyder. He was so nice. And yeah, I've had a chance to hang out with Zack Snyder. He was a guest at one of our annual Masters of the Web parties at Comic-Con. Could not have been a nicer guy. Seriously. And like one of these guys who does not act like who you would think a typical Hollywood guy would be. He was just so cool and down to earth and just like, honestly, one of the nicer guys to be around. He was great. That said, I love those experiences. The one experience that I had that was like, I was an extra in a bunch of movies. So I've been on a bunch of movie sets, but the experience I had that was kind of similar to yours was I got invited by Paramount. Paramount actually, this is when I was still living in Canada and doing my website, The Movie Blog. It was the first big thing I had ever done with a movie studio. Paramount invited me to come to Los Angeles and visit the set of Transformers. Now, at the time, that was like my most anticipated movie. I was Transformer psychotic. I was covering Transformer stuff almost every day. And so they were shooting one of the big last battle scenes in the streets of Transformers. And they were shooting in Los Angeles. So Paramount flew me down to LA, put me up in what was the Hollywood. I can't remember what the name of the hotel is now, but it's the big hotel right on Hollywood and Highland. That was the first place I ever stayed in Los Angeles. And I can't remember the name of the hotel now, but if you ever visit Hollywood, there's this big hotel right on Hollywood and Highland. And that's where they put us up. And then they drove us in shuttles down to the streets where they were shooting these big battle scenes at the climax of Transformers. And it was all these extras in the streets and people with giant sticks that were like 20 feet tall with these green balls on them that were supposed to be the Transformers. They were the references for the Transformers, for the CGI people later. And that's the day I met Megan Fox. That's the day I met Shia LaBeouf. And I met Michael Bay that day. And so what they did, we got to see Michael Bay going, action, and all the street, like all the people in the street running in terror as if there's giant robots fighting around them. That was kind of awesome. And then what they did is they pulled us into this little store shop. And then one at a time, like Zack Snyder, Michael Bay came in and talked to us for about 15, 20 minutes. There was about 20 of us. So he came in and talked with us for about 20 minutes. And then Shia LaBeouf would come in and he talked to us for about 20 minutes to 30 minutes. Megan Fox came in and talked to us for about 20 or 30 minutes. And it was just a really cool experience being on a big action set like that. So I can imagine being there on the set of Man of Steel during the Smallville battle. That would have been pretty cool to see trucks getting turned over and the explosions in the 7-Eleven. That must have been really cool, man. I'm a little bit envious, dude. I'm a little bit envious. All right. Next up, let's see here. Where are we at? There it is. Next up, Broom Closet Days gang. I think you're probably talking about the AMC Broom Closet Days. Hey, John. I know you've been exploring different avenues for your show due to various problems on YouTube. Have you considered brand deals? Maybe work with a brand to creator agency to find sponsorships. Would love to hear your thought process on this. Here's the thing. I have no idea how to find this. I don't have sponsors. Everybody just thinks, oh, just get a sponsor. Sponsors are really difficult to get. They're very, very difficult to get. And listen, look, I made the cognitive choice years ago. I made the cognitive choice that I was not going to make content that gets tons of viewers. I could do, random little hate videos, and I could do weekly top tens, and I could do, trailer reactions. And I like trailer reactions. They're not my thing. They don't come naturally for me to do. So I don't do them, whatever. But I appreciate people who do them, like the Real Rejects and the Day One guys, Ecomog and guys like that. But not my thing. I could make the content and I could do a lot of things, do the TMZ glitzy stuff to get tons and tons of views. I knew all the way back in the AMC days, but particularly when I relaunched my own channel, that the content I wanted to make was not the kind of content that will get 1 million views. 2-hour-long table discussion videos, for the most part, unless you've got like big celebrities, but for the most part, is not the stuff that's going to get you millions of views, at least not normally. And, I'm comfortable with that. I've always been comfortable with that. Don't I want my channel to be bigger? Oh, absolutely. Everybody wants their channel to be bigger. But I'm super thrilled with how big my channel's gotten. It's certainly bigger than I ever thought it would be, especially since for the most part, I just kind of do it solo. So I'm definitely thrilled. But, you know, I know if I'm going to make this kind of content, that I'm never going to be, you know, 20 million monthly views, you know. I just know that. And I'm okay with that because this is the content I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about making this kind of content. And getting like honest, real sponsorship deals, you need much, much bigger numbers. But John, I've seen people say, this is sponsored by Audible. Yeah. But that's very small money. It's very, very small money if you have relatively small nobody numbers like me. Like, you got to remember, I'm not just being self-deprecating. I am an effing nobody. It's true. I am a nobody. And understanding that I am a nobody and I have compared to some YouTube channels, yes, I have very big numbers, but to compare to a lot of YouTube channels, I have very, 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 very tiny numbers. And I'm comfortable with that, you know, because this is the content I'm passionate about. This is the type of community I'm passionate about. But because my numbers are what they are, big for some, but very, very small compared to real major players, I'm not going to get those sponsorship deals. And it's not like I can just get on the phone and call Coca-Cola. Hey, Coca-Cola, want to be a sponsor of the John Campea Show? It doesn't quite work like that. It's nearly impossible. And that's why you basically only really see like real, again, people say this episode is sponsored by Paperlike, the screen cover for your iPad, right? But that's actually not real full sponsorship. And it's a very small amount of money depending on the types of numbers that your channel has. And I'm just not in the position that I can really get like full-fledged sponsors. I'm open to the idea, but I'm not a marketing guy. I don't know how to go out and get big corporate sponsorships. And even if I knew how to do it, I'm just being real with you guys here. Even if I knew how to do it, I don't have the kind of numbers that would justify getting those types of sponsorships. I don't. I mean, I remember even being at AMC. Here's the reality. I was even at AMC theaters. And AMC theaters, well, we didn't really need sponsors because AMC theaters, they saw what we were doing with AMC Movie News as a piece of marketing for AMC, and it was working great until their HR department effed everything up. But then we went over to Collider, right? And we worked for Complex. Complex is great, by the way. I like Complex very much. Complex is the company that owned Collider, and I like Complex very much. I could say something, but I'm not. But I like Complex very much. And even they were like, our show Movie Talk. Like, we were getting like 100,000 views a day when I was there. When I was at Movie Talk, we were getting like 100,000 plus views per day. And even Complex, with its branding and marketing departments and all that kind of stuff, they never got us any real sponsorships. They got a few things. Oh, plug this for this one. They got a couple of little tiny things, but even they weren't. With a show that got 100,000 live, not everybody watched live, but 100,000 daily views of the one show, Movie Talk. Movie Talk itself, 100,000 views. It was incredible. And even then we couldn't get sponsorships. So I know, I'm sorry, I apologize. We're probably talking about something right now that most of you aren't interested in the least. But just to answer your question, it's really easy to say, well, how about you go out and get a big sponsor? The reality is that's chasing a unicorn. That's basically like chasing a unicorn. It's very difficult to do, especially when you're a site with my numbers. And I am a small fish, man. I am a totally small fish. I am an effing nobody. And so it's tough to do that. Anyway, but thank you for the question, man. And I totally get you being curious about that altogether. All right, let's move on here. Next up, that was Broom Closet Days. Next up, Dan Ketchum writes. Where do we go? Oh, there it is. Dan Ketchum writes. Let me get this straight. Wonder Woman gets a magic rock with one wish. And instead of wishing for world peace or an end to global hunger, she wishes to get her stud muffin back. Makes her seem less heroic. Well, I mean, hold a second. We don't know the context, right? We don't know the context of the story. Don't jump to conclusions. Don't jump to conclusions. It very well could be, we simply don't know. It very well could be like she probably decides not to use it, right? Because destruction follows wherever this stone goes. But maybe unknowing to her, she's like sitting beside it or something while she's thinking about Steve, and that triggers the wish and Steve comes back. All I'm saying is we don't know how this will work. So let's not make any assumptions. It's not like, wow, I'm Wonder Woman. I have this rock. I can make one wish. I could wish for world peace. I could wish for cures for all diseases. Nope. I need a booty call. So I'm going to wish for Steve Trevor to come back. Like, let's not make that assumption that that's how it's going to play out in the movie. I have a feeling, and I can't back this up. I have no proof of this. This is just me speculating. I have a feeling it's going to be a case of she inadvertently does it. I have a feeling it's going to be that she inadvertently does it. I don't know that for sure, but we will see how that all plays out. All right, next up, Kyle Wilkins writes, well, and this is a $20 tip. Thank you so much, Kyle, for supporting the channel that much. And if there's a question in here, we will segment it out, put it up as its own video in the next couple of weeks. All right, Kyle writes, we all miss the great John Schnepp. Yeah, we just had the 2-year anniversary of the passing of John Schnepp. There have been a lot of great films that he would have loved, absolutely, that came out in the past 2 years. If you could pick one film to sit down and watch with him that came out in the past 2 years, what would it be? You know what? The first one that everybody jumps to is Endgame. I mean, for obvious reasons. And hold on, let me pull something up here. Everybody automatically jumps to Endgame, and that's totally understandable why. Right? I mean, because, you know, the MCU, and it was the big climax of the MCU and stuff that he had followed. But I'll tell you what, the movie that I watched, that when I came out of it, my first thought was, Schnepp would have loved this movie. And that was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse for me. There's something about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and I just remember when I walked out, my first thought was, Schnepp would have loved this. It was so different. And the way they treated the characters and the way there was something about that movie that I think really would have appealed to Schnepp a lot. I'm not saying he would have liked Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse more than Endgame. I'm not necessarily saying that. But it's just, that's the movie to me that, again, when I came out, I went like, oh my God, Schnepp would have loved that. He would have loved that. And I remember it was a very special day. I got invited to, I was at the premiere of Endgame, but the next day after the premiere of Endgame, there was also the first press screening was the next day, the day after the premiere. And it was on the Disney lot. And I had a +1, and I invited Robert Meyer Burnett to come along with me. And Robert and I, he came to my place. We then drove and went to go grab lunch first before heading to the Disney lot to watch this Endgame screening. And we were sitting down, and Rob was telling me the story. He said, you know, it was 1 year ago that I was John Schnepp's +1. This is Robert telling the story. He says, I was John Schnepp's +1 to go see the first press screening of Infinity War at the Disney lot. And here we are 1 year later to go see the follow-up film to that, and I'm your +1 today. And we went down there, and it was great. We bumped into some people we knew, and we reminisced, because a lot of us remember Schnepp was there at the year before watching the first Infinity War one. So there's obviously a big case to be made for Infinity War. But yeah, to me, again, the first one that popped to my mind was the movie that made Schnepp jump into my mind first when I first walked out was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Anyway, thanks for asking that question, Kyle, and for bringing that up. I appreciate that, man. All right, next. Starscream writes, to further stress the confusion of HBO Max towards or Howard Stern spent an hour talking about how he couldn't figure out how to get HBO Max and the difference between the two. I, however, am annoyed that I can't watch Max on my projector. It's connected to Roku. I mean, that's a great example of that. If you got a media personality like a Howard Stern coming out and talking publicly, I can't even figure out how this damn thing works, then you've got a problem. You've got a significant problem. And again, just for those of you who missed what we were talking about, I mean, the low stuff, they definitely have a brand confusion problem. What's the difference between HBO, HBO Go, HBO, or HBO Now, and HBO Max? What's the difference? What's one and what's not the other? Blah. Content confusion. What content is on there? Hey, where did those movies go that you advertised was going to be a part of HBO Max and it's already gone? Platform confusion. I got a Roku hooked up to a projector. I can't watch it now because it's not on my Roku. I mean, they had all these problems. And yeah, I think that's a great thing to point out, Starscream, that you got other media personalities also kind of expressing a little bit of exasperation with this scenario as well. All right, next up, Derek writes, I think if HBO Max had 4K content, this would greatly help. I honestly don't think so. I don't think, listen, most people, this is the God's honest truth. Most people cannot tell the difference between 4K content and HD content. And depending on the television you have, and depending on how far you sit from your television, it's scientifically proven your eye cannot discern the difference between 4K and HD. Depending on how far you sit, how big the television screen is that you have, and how far you sit from that television screen. You can go look this up online about the difference, because your eyes can only perceive certain pixels in a certain way, and the greater the distance is relative to the size of the screen, you can't even tell that there's a difference. So I don't think that if HBO Max had 4K, and honestly, I don't know that they don't have 4K, but maybe they don't. I don't think that becomes a big defining factor for a significant amount of people. I think not having 4K might be a deal breaker to a small percentage of those aficionados of who really like their home streaming content, right? But I think that represents a minority, but maybe I'm underestimating that. But I don't know that would make a great deal of difference. Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't. You might be right. All right, Eric, okay, I'm going to try this. I butcher a lot of names. I'm going to try this one. Eric Nadargiacomo. Como? I think I got close. Anyway, sends in a $20 tip. Thank you so much for that, man. If there is a question in here, we're going to segment it out as its own video in the next couple weeks. Hi, John. I recently watched Enemy Mine. I love Enemy Mine. One of my favorite movies growing up. Man, I love to remake made. You'd love to have a remake made. What do you think of the movie? And do you think it deserves to be remade? All right. So I'll say, we've talked about Enemy Mine on this show a bunch. Hold on a second. Maybe if I didn't misspell it. Why am I not getting this? There we go. Maybe if I spell it correct. So we've talked about Enemy Mine on this show a bunch, right? I think it's Dennis Quaid and Officer and a Gentleman, Academy Award winner, Louis Gossett Jr., right? Classic thing, sci-fi, distant future, humanity and this alien race at war, and one of the alien races and one of the humanities find themselves deserted on this planet together, and they end up having to figure out how to survive together and all this kind of stuff. I love the movie. There was actually an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation that was kind of a play on Enemy Mine, where Picard and this alien captain of another ship who don't speak the same language, well, one speaks in metaphors, which is kind of fun, are stranded together on this world, and they got to figure out a way to communicate. And so that episode was directly influenced by Enemy Mine. I think what was in that episode of Star Trek, Margart and Gerard at Tanagra? Is that what the big saying was in it? Anyway, whatever. Yeah, I think Enemy Mine would make a great remake. At the same time, I don't know that it would benefit a lot from modern technology. You could put a little more action in there, but the heart of that movie really isn't that core struggle. And I think that is, you know me, I'm okay with you remaking any movie. Go ahead, remake any movie. I'm totally fine with it. But I would be particularly down for this. Yes, I would like to. I wouldn't mind a remake of this one. Now you make me think about it. Now I kind of maybe think I want to go and watch another and go watch it again, the original one again. Anyway, Miami Heat 2020 Champs writes, "Hey, John, I just saw X-Men First Class the other day, and for the first time in a long time, I totally forgot about the scene where Magneto sticks the coin through Shaw's head. Very slow. I love that scene. Man, that scene is so badass, and so is the movie. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm going to point out something. Now, maybe this is I'm going to tell you something about my little documentary. I'm working on many of you guys know I'm working on a documentary right now. One of the guys who I was very, very, very lucky and very fortunate to have in my documentary is the writer of X-Men First Class and also the writer of the first Thor movie, directed by Kenneth Branagh, Ashley Miller. The writer of X-Men First Class and of Thor and many other things is actually in my documentary. And I remember I loved sitting down and interviewing him for my documentary. He's very, very cool, very good communicator, and I'm very, very stoked about that. Anyway, there, I just gave you guys a little insight into my documentary that I'm pretty stoked about. Anyway, yeah, somebody's saying, spoiler alert, John, spoiler alert. Yeah, it was a bit of a spoiler, but there you go. Anyway, that scene, putting the coin through the dude's head, so good. So good. Everything in that movie with Magneto or Charles, I just live and die on, man. I just absolutely live and die on. So, sorry to point out to you, Miami Heat are not going to be the champions this year. Sorry to bust that to you, but we'll see how that goes. Anyway, that's a great one to bring up, Miami Heat. All right, next up. Just a couple left here, guys. Starscream writes, "And what the hell is going on with PlayStation 5? I want to pre-order it. There's still no price and still no release date. Another company dropping the ball. Stay safe and watch my Netflix show on July 31st, unfairly called Transformers. Can't wait." I don't know. Listen, with PlayStation though, they haven't dropped the ball because the launch hasn't happened. Right? You can't say they dropped the ball when they haven't had a launch yet. They're building up to the launch. So let's evaluate how well PlayStation does their PS5 launch once the launch happens. Then let's evaluate how good the buildup played into it, how effectively it was pulled off. Did they have enough supply ready for people? Is the price point right for what it is you're getting? Let's see all that. I mean, I was obviously concerned. Like we talked about this, the day they did that big presentation for PS5, it was a huge elephant in the room that they didn't even mention the price. How do you talk about a product and not talk about what the price of it's going to be? That's a big major thing. But anyway, let's see how the launch goes when the launch actually happens. All right, next up. TJ Ninja writes, like you, the more I watch Man of Steel, the more I like it. But I also feel that the more I watch The Dark Knight Rises, the more I love Tom Hardy's Bane. The shadows betray you because they belong to me. Such a badass quote. Yeah, listen, I've talked about this before. I love Tom Hardy's performance in it. I don't know that I particularly love all the decisions Christopher Nolan made with the character. But more than that, The Dark Knight Rises is probably my least favorite Christopher Nolan movie. Now, I like every Christopher... There hasn't been a single Christopher Nolan movie out that I don't like. I like them all. That includes The Dark Knight Rises. I like The Dark Knight Rises. But to me, it was also a significant... For me personally, and I can only speak for myself, it was a significant step backwards from The Dark Knight. There were a lot of narrative holes. A lot of the logic didn't make sense. I don't know. There was also very good stuff in it. That's why, at the end of the day, I like The Dark Knight Rises. I do. But I was not thrilled with it. And maybe, it's been a number of years since I've gone back to revisit again. Maybe I should go back and watch it again and to see if maybe, like, I'm with you. The more I watch The Man of Steel, it just gets better and better to me. Maybe if I go back and give The Dark Knight Rises another shot, maybe it'll have a little bit more of an impact on me this time. So I don't know. Maybe I should do that because I do like Christopher Nolan films, but I say, yeah, right now, Dark Knight Rises is my least favorite Christopher Nolan film, even though I still like it. but I might have to go back and give that another shot. All right. Final question of the day. Gustav Skarsgård, who we were just talking about earlier today. You said the beginning of Cursed and the end didn't really satisfy you because it didn't really resolve anything. Do you think if the beginning didn't show the foreshadowing, you would have enjoyed it more? Love what you and your team do. All right, thanks for that, man. And listen, if they didn't start the show, because episode 1, the very first thing that happens is they show you what happens later, right? The main character girl getting struck with a bunch of arrows and falling into the water. And then the season ends on that, but not showing how it resolves. That's incredibly frustrating. I still would not have appreciated. I don't like, listen, you've got to reward your viewers for getting through a season. And I'm okay with cliffhangers, but not your overall story thread cliffhangers. Like I said, I always go back to Supernatural. Supernatural does it best. They have their main story for a season, and then in the final episode of the season, they bring that story to conclusion while opening up the new door for where we're going to go into the next season. I still would have been frustrated with the ending to this season of Cursed. I still would have been frustrated, but not as frustrated because, again, normally when you start off a show that way, you bring us up to that point later and then show how that resolves. And they didn't do that. And that to me was infuriating. It's like, okay, so I just watched, I think it was 10 episodes. I just watched 10 episodes for nothing? I mean, obviously not for nothing. I enjoyed a bunch of it along the way. Yes, it wasn't great, but I enjoyed it to a degree, despite all my problems with it. But as like, so my reward for going through the whole season was just to end up where we started at. That was frustrating to me. But I think my frustration, to your point, Gustav, would have been less frustration. I still would have been frustrated, but I think I would have been less frustrated, to your point on that. Anyway, guys, that will do it for today's installment of the John Campea Show. Thank you guys so much for being here. A special thank you to all of you guys who did send in live questions. Number 1, because you gave us the great fun things to talk about. Number 2, you supported the channel while you're doing it. And all of us here, thank you guys very, very much for that. Don't forget the John Campea Show returns tomorrow. Make sure you come back and join us then. Also, thank you to you guys just for making this show a part of your day. You guys can be doing a lot of different things, and the fact that you take out part of your day to make this show a part of your day is something that is not lost on us. Thank you very much for that. Don't forget, guys, do the 4 main things. Stay smart, stay safe, take care of yourselves, and please take care of the people around you. That will do it for me for today, guys. Thank you so much for being here. My name is John Campea, and until next time, my friends, bye-bye.